2,000 years ago, a ruthless prince died in a failed ritual meant to seal his soul forever. But the curse misfired. His spirit wasn't trapped. It was left waiting. Present day, a construction worker uncovers an ancient coffin buried under the town. He thinks it's just history. But the moment the lid shifts, something ancient wakes up. A shadow spreads, lights die, people vanish, and the prince, furious and free after centuries, wants his kingdom back. Some graves were never meant to open, but now it's too late. 2,000 years ago, long before the towns and highways, before the concrete and steel, there was a kingdom carved from red desert stone. A kingdom ruled by a young man feared more than he was loved. Prince Kalor. Kalor was striking, sharp jaw, golden robes, obsidian hair. But behind his beauty hid a cold, calculating cruelty. His people whispered that the prince had no heartbeat, that his chest held something darker. He hungered for immortality, not the poetic kind, but domination without end, a reign that would stretch beyond death itself. And when he heard rumors of an ancient ritual, one that could trap the soul inside its corpse forever, Kalor demanded it for himself. His advisors begged him to abandon it. His priests warned him that such rituals came with consequences. But Kalor believed consequences were for lesser men. The ritual began in the royal burial chamber, lit by torches, drenched in incense thick enough to choke the lungs. Kalor lay on a stone slab, breathing shallowly, surrounded by masked priests chanting in the forgotten tongue. But something went wrong. A tremor shook the earth. The lead priest lost his footing. Blood spilled in the wrong direction. A symbol broke. The curse misfired. And instead of sealing Kalor's soul inside his body, it cast him into a limbo between life and death. The priests panicked. They sealed his body in an obsidian coffin, chained it, buried it in a forbidden ground, and swore never to speak his name again. Kalor's spirit was left suspended, not living, not dead, just waiting. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. Maps changed. Rivers dried. The desert swallowed kingdoms, including Kalor's. The burial chamber collapsed. The priest's warnings faded. And the grave, once sacred and feared, became nothing more than a patch of soil beneath a modern town. A town busy with construction, noise, and progress. The perfect place to forget the past. But the past remembers. Time is the one force even kingdoms cannot defeat. Centuries rolled by like shifting desert winds. Storms erased roads. Sand buried monuments. The once great empire that Prince Kalor ruled, with iron pride and a hunger for eternal dominion, crumbled until even its name dissolved into myth. Where temples once stood, the earth cracked open. Where soldiers once marched, silence settled like a heavy shroud. Generations lived and died without ever knowing that beneath their feet lay a prison crafted by terrified priests. The burial chamber that held Kalor's sealed coffin, once guarded day and night by royal sentinels, collapsed slowly over time. Stone slabs shifted, ritual markings faded, the sacred warnings etched around the tomb were swallowed by dust and darkness. Eventually, nature reclaimed the cursed ground. Storms carried soil from distant valleys. Roots twisted through the broken ceiling of the chamber. Rain seeped in, diluting ink, erasing carvings, softening what once was feared. And with each passing century, Kalor's memory thinned, his name spoken less and less, until it vanished entirely from the world of the living. Even the priest's descendants, those who had sworn a blood oath to keep watch over the burial site, lost their purpose, their lineage scattering, their sacred duties forgotten. The land above the tomb changed hands endlessly. Farmers plowed it, travelers camped on it, unaware of the malice beneath. Children once played there, laughing, never sensing the cold hunger buried deep below. Then time marched forward to the age of blueprints and bulldozers. The forgotten burial ground was surveyed, mapped, and labeled by modern planners as nothing more than undeveloped property. Contracts were signed, machines were brought in, plans were drafted for something as ordinary as a new shopping complex. Progress did what centuries of nature could not. It cut deep. It carved the earth open. It unearthed secrets best left smothered. The workers who first arrived felt the atmosphere immediately, a strange heaviness, as if the ground itself didn't want to be touched. They dismissed it as heat, as old soil, as nerves, until their tools began to hit hollow spaces beneath the surface. A sound that didn't belong, a sound like knocking from below. But no one thought about ancient kings, or failed rituals, or souls waiting in darkness. To them, it was just another construction site, just another patch of land ready to be reshaped. Only the earth remembered. Only the shadows still trembled with the memory of Kalor's curse. And as the machines tore deeper, the air grew colder, as if something far beneath the soil felt the world moving above it once more. The burial ground was waking. Morning broke over the construction site with a pale, washed-out light, the kind that never seems to warm anything it touches. Workers arrived as usual, coffee in hand, boots crunching on gravel, joking about schedules and delays. None of them noticed that the ground felt harder that day, as if something beneath had stiffened with anticipation. By noon, the digging reached deeper than the blueprints expected. Machines roared, metal claws tearing into compacted ancient soil. Then, a sound, a metallic clang that rang through the pit, sharper than stone, hollow and unnatural. The foreman frowned, waving the machines off. Engines died. Dust settled in a quiet haze. A worker named Daniel, the kind who always volunteered for anything interesting, grabbed a crowbar and slid down the dirt wall into the pit. He brushed away layers of packed earth. Underneath was a surface smooth, cold, and impossibly dark. A stone unlike anything used in local history. More workers climbed down to help. Soon the shape became undeniable. A rectangular mass, buried horizontally, engraved with symbols neither modern nor familiar. Daniel laughed nervously. "Looks like we found someone's old tombstone," he joked. But the others didn't laugh. Not because of the coffin, but because the air had turned icy in seconds. Cold enough for their breath to fog. Cold enough for a worker's water bottle to frost over. No wind, no cloud cover. Just sudden, impossible cold. They exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel pressed a hand against the coffin. It felt warm, warm like living skin. He jerked his hand back. The others stared. The foreman called for the site camera crew, eager to document the ancient artifact. But as they lifted the equipment, the lenses fogged instantly, then cracked, as if exposed to two temperatures at once. One by one, every electronic device on site flickered, glitched, and died. The power generator sputtered, then went out entirely. The site plunged into an unnatural quiet, a silence that pressed into their ears, so heavy it felt like the air itself wanted to suffocate sound. Daniel exhaled slowly. Let's just open it a little, just to look, for history. No one wanted to agree, but curiosity is a powerful poison. So is pride. He wedged the crowbar under the stone lid. The metal groaned. The lid shifted by less than an inch. That was enough. A gasp of air escaped the coffin, not stale or decayed, but cold and wet, like breath from something sleeping underwater. Daniel stumbled back. Then the shadows came. A thin, twisting wisp spilled out, curling into the air, like smoke that moved with intention. The workers froze as the shadow expanded, spreading across the ground, seeping into boots, crawling up legs, searching for something or someone. A worker screamed as the darkness wrapped around his ankle, and with a sudden pull, he vanished. No dust, no body, just gone. Panic exploded. Workers scrambled up the pit walls, fighting for footing. But the soil crumbled strangely under their fingers, like something was loosening it from beneath. The foreman tried calling out, but his voice cut out mid-shout, as if swallowed. Daniel, still closest to the coffin, stared into the thin opening. From within, a pair of faint golden lights flickered. Eyes. Eyes that had waited centuries. The shadow surged upward in a violent burst. The coffin lid blew off, slamming into the side of the pit with a thunderous crack. Dust erupted. The air convulsed. Then a figure rose. Not solid, not smoke, something between. A tall silhouette draped in torn ceremonial armor, its edges frayed by centuries of death, but its presence unmistakably royal. His form flickered like a flame underwater, but his face, even half shadow, held a terrible, commanding beauty. Prince Kalor had awakened. He inhaled deeply, as though taking in the world he had been denied. His voice, not spoken, but projected into their minds, shuddered through the air. Who dares disturb my rest? Daniel collapsed to his knees, unable to breathe. Another worker vanished, dragged into the spreading darkness, without even a cry this time. Kalor stepped fully out of the coffin. The ground vibrated under his weight, as though acknowledging a rightful king. He gazed at the construction site, at machines, tools, and men dressed strangely, and something ancient flared in his eyes. Recognition, anger, possession. My kingdom, stolen, my throne, forgotten. And now you raise a city over my grave? His voice deepened, resonating like a choir of ghosts. Then you will give it back. A windless storm erupted from his form, dark tendrils slashing across the site, folding structures inward like paper, swallowing screams. Lights in the nearby town flickered, animals fled. Every shadow on every wall leaned toward the excavation pit, as if obeying him. Kaylor lifted one hand. Shadows rose like an army. This land is mine. Then everything went black. Night fell earlier than it should have. The sun dipped below the horizon far too fast, as if fleeing the land it once warmed. In town, people noticed first in small ways. Streetlights flickering, a dog refusing to walk through its own backyard, phones freezing on a single frame of static. But closer to the construction site, the air was thickening, changing, as though invisible dust was settling on everything. A deputy named Mara was the first to investigate. She parked her cruiser at the edge of the cleared site and stepped out cautiously, shining her flashlight over the mounds of dirt. The beam cut through nothing. It was swallowed, as if the darkness had depth. She called out for anyone. Her voice echoed strangely, returning late, stretched, distorted. Mara reached the pit. Her boots slid on the loose soil, and she froze when she saw it. The coffin split open, stone cracked like old bone, symbols glowing faintly like embers of a dying fire, and around it, the collapsed bodies of machines, twisted as though crushed by an invisible giant. But no bodies, no workers. She radioed in, nothing but static, and a faint undertone, like whispering breath. A wind brushed past her, cold, wet, alive. She spun around, drawing her weapon. Nothing stood behind her, in the physical world, but in the corner of her eye, a tall figure stood at the taut edge of the pit, watching. She turned fully. It vanished. Her breath quickened. She stepped back, instinct screaming at her to leave. But behind her, the darkness thickened, pressed against her back, and exhaled. Mara bolted. She scrambled up the side of the pit, tearing her palms on the dirt, stumbled into her cruiser, and floored the engine. The headlights shot forward, illuminating the road. And the prince, standing in the center, perfectly still, a silhouette draped in flickering shadow, eyes glowing like molten gold. Her blood turned to ice. She swerved. The cruiser skidded sideways. But by the time she looked back, the road was empty. She didn't go home that night. She drove straight to town hall, voice shaking, heart racing, trying to convince anyone who would listen that something had awakened. But no one understood, not yet, because the prince had already entered town. By midnight, strange events began everywhere. A grocery store freezer door frosted over until it cracked. The power grid flickered, humming like something alive. A child screamed when his shadow stretched across the entire room and didn't move with him. And across the town square, security cameras caught glimpses. A tall, ancient figure, walking with inhuman smoothness, blending into darkness, observing buildings like they were old memories. Prince Kaylor drifted through the streets, hands brushing along brick walls, as if reacquainting himself with land that once belonged to him. He whispered to himself, "My empire, buried beneath wood and glass." His voice was layered, haunted, the echo of 1,000 spirits chained to him. He approached the town church. The bell tower groaned. The cross atop it twisted slowly, warping toward his presence. Inside the houses around him, people felt it. Unease, cold, a pressure in their skulls, like a warning from instincts older than language. Kaylor lifted his hand. Shadows poured down the church walls like black water. The building dimmed. Windows darkened. The bell cracked. And one by one, Lights across the entire neighborhood died. At 1:14 a.m., the whole town blacked out. Every lamp, every bulb, every phone, every screen. Darkness reigned. His darkness. Prince Kaler stood in the center of it all, breathing deeply, drinking in the energy of a world he felt owed to him. But he was not complete. Not yet. His mumbling, once a whisper, rose into a voice of command. Find me the heart of this town. Find me its leaders. Bring me those who built over my grave, for they shall be the first to kneel, or the first to fall. Around him, the shadows thickened, forming humanoid figures. Only shadows melting into darkness, soulless silhouettes that bent to his will, forming an army from the darkness itself. The cursed prince began his march, and the town began to die. Dawn. The town felt abandoned, silent, breathless. The streets were empty, not because people fled, but because no one dared to step outside. Those who tried didn't return. The few remaining citizens hid behind locked doors, some clutching phones that couldn't turn on, others praying, others simply waiting for a miracle no one believed would come. Mara, the deputy, became one of the first survivors to organize others. She gathered a small group in the basement of the town hall. An electrician named Jorge, a schoolteacher, Miss Hale, a teenage boy, Liam, who had lost his parents overnight, and an elderly historian, Grant Voss, whose family had studied the region for generations. Mara stood in the center of the dim room, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "We are dealing with something ancient," she said. "Something powerful. Something intelligent." Grant nodded grimly. "I know the legends," he whispered. "They spoke of a cruel monarch, a prince who ruled through fear and blood. He was said to command shadows, twist light, and drink the strength of his enemies' souls." Mara frowned. "That's not a legend. That's what I saw." Jorge leaned forward. "Can he be stopped?" Grant hesitated. "There was a ritual," he said slowly. "A failed one. It was meant to bind his soul forever. The ritual required a seal, a pure light, forged in the heart of the kingdom. It was never completed." Liam, voice small, asked, "So, he's free now?" Grant nodded, and growing stronger. A thud echoed above them. Then another. The group froze. Mara crept up the stairs, cracking open the door. Her breath hitched. A shadow figure stood outside the town hall, helmet-like head scanning windows, searching. She ducked back down. Her pulse throbbed painfully.
"They're hunting for us," she whispered.
The basement went silent. Then Grant spoke softly.
"Maybe one thing left that can weaken him."
Everyone turned. He unrolled a faded map.
Old parchment, hand-sketched, detailing the ancient kingdom that once stood here. He pointed to a symbol, a circular seal, long lost, but not destroyed.
"If we can find the light seal," Grant said, "we may be able to trap him again. At least long enough to weaken him." Jorge breathed out. "And where is it?" Grant tapped the map. "Under the church." The room fell silent. Everyone knew the church was ground zero of Kaler's growing power. Going there was suicide. Liam whispered, "He'll kill us." Grant shook his head. "He doesn't want us dead. Not yet. He wants us afraid." Mara took a breath. "We move at sunset. We go together. We end this." No one felt ready, but they also knew if they didn't try,
No one else would.
As night fell again, the survivors stepped outside cautiously, hearts pounding. The sky churned with unnatural clouds. The street lamps flickered with black static. Every building leaned in shadow, as if the darkness had weight and intention. They made their way to the church, moving in silence, avoiding the roaming shadow guard that patrolled the streets. At the church entrance, the heavy wooden doors stood slightly ajar. Inside, the air was thick, almost solid. Jorge whispered, "I can't breathe." Grant pressed onward, down the aisle, toward the altar cracked by Kaylor's presence. They lifted a rug revealing stone flooring engraved with the same symbols found on the coffin. They pried it open. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. The group went down, one by one. Flashlights flickered, but held steady just enough to guide their way. They reached a chamber, circular, carved with ancient runes, and in the center, a pedestal, empty. Grant's face drained of color. "It's not here," he whispered. Then the chamber trembled. A cold voice spoke from behind them. "You seek what was mine." They turned. Prince Kaylor stood at the base of the stairs, shadows twisting around him like serpents. He raised his hand. Darkness gathered. His wrath was only beginning.
The chamber dimmed until only Kaylor's eyes glowed, radiant and merciless. The survivors backed away. Grant almost fell over the pedestal. Kaylor stepped forward, voice a thunderous blend of fury and cold elegance. "You dig through my kingdom, you break my tomb, and now you steal from my sanctum." Mara pushed the others behind her. She didn't raise her gun. She already knew bullets meant nothing. "What do you want?" she demanded. Kaylor's expression twisted, not anger, but disdain. "What was taken from me? My throne, my legacy, my empire." He raised his arms. The chamber walls shuddered. Dust fell like dying snow. "I will remake this land in my image. Every soul shall bend to me, as they once did." Grant suddenly shouted, "The seal isn't here because it was moved centuries ago. You don't know where it is, do you?" Kaylor froze, a crack in his perfection. Mara's eyes widened. He didn't know. The ancient prince had risen incomplete. Grant continued, trembling. "Your own priests betrayed you. They hid the light seal before your death ritual. It was never brought to your tomb." Rage rippled across Kaylor's form. His shadows, swelling violently, striking the walls, cracking stone. The chamber shook. Mara grabbed Liam and Jorge, pulling them behind the pedestal as a wave of darkness slammed the floor where they stood. Kaylor advanced on Grant. "Where is it?" Grant backed away, voice shaking. "They hid it where no tyrant would look. A place of peace, of pure light." Kaylor snarled. Grant whispered, "The old lighthouse." The prince's eyes blazed. He surged forward, but Mara acted first. She hurled a chunk of broken stone at the chamber ceiling. It hit a support beam. The ceiling cracked, then collapsed between Kaylor and the survivors, separating them. Dust exploded. "Go!" Mara yelled. They fled up the stairs before Kaylor Torf. Above ground, night wind roared. The town twisted in darkness, as if every shadow watched them. But they ran. Through empty streets, past flickering street lamps, toward the coastline where the lighthouse stood, like a lonely tooth against the sky. The lighthouse was abandoned,
weather-beaten, but still standing. They burst inside, slamming the door. Mara turned her flashlight upward. The stairs spiraled endlessly. Grant gasped. The seal was placed in the lantern room to shine over the ocean, to keep darkness away. They climbed, breathless, terrified. Halfway up, the lighthouse trembled. A voice boomed from outside. "Come to me." Kaelor had arrived. Shadows crawled under the door, up the outer walls, searching, slithering. The survivors reached the lantern room. And there, resting inside the ancient lamp mechanism, was a crystal disc, glowing faintly with warm, golden light. The light seal. Grant lifted it with trembling hands. At that moment, the lighthouse window shattered. Kaelor surged inside, form raging with fury. Jorge screamed. Liam ducked behind a beam. Mara drew her knife, the only weapon she had, knowing it was useless, but refusing to die cowering. Kaelor roared, "Return my seal." Grant held the glowing disc toward him. "No," he whispered. "This ends now." The seal flared bright, a blinding, ancient radiance that filled the room. Kaelor screamed, shadows tearing from his body like burning cloth. The light forced him backward, pushing him against the wall, cracking his form into fragments of darkness. "No, I am eternal." Grant pressed forward, voice steady despite shaking arms. Not anymore. The seal's light engulfed the room, and Kaelor erupted in a cyclone of shadow, disintegrating piece by piece until only a fading echo remained. "My kingdom." Then silence. The lighthouse steadied, the air cleared. Kaelor was gone. Mara collapsed to her knees. Jorge sobbed softly. Liam stared at the seal, mesmerized and terrified. Grant exhaled shakily. The ritual has finally been fulfilled. Mara asked, breathless, "Is it over?" Grant looked down at the glowing disc. No curse is ever truly over, but he is bound again, and this time we know where he sleeps. The camera pans out through the broken lighthouse window. The town quiet, light slowly returning, dawn rising, a new day, a fragile peace. But somewhere in the deep corners of the earth, a faint growl echoes, promising that darkness never stays buried forever.